Hi, my name is Sarah Mitchke, and I am a graduate student at Texas State University. And the name of my project is called Lost on the Trail, Investigating Hiking, Wayfinding, and Trail Navigation within the National Parks. Every year, thousands of search and rescue operations are performed to locate and save lost or missing persons within our national parks. Yosemite National Park Search and Rescue Team responds to approximately 250 rescues per year, with nearly 70% of those rescues dedicated to saving lost, missing, or injured hikers. Now, my primary research has included observations taken on Yosemite's most popular hiking trails. Observations included documenting trail conditions, collecting photos of sign evidence, and noting sign placement. I also collaborated with Yosemite Search and Rescue about wayfinding in the park and their pain points with current trail signage. I attended a lecture by John Dill, a Yosemite Search and Rescue veteran, to learn about rescues and rescue outcomes in Yosemite and how to stay safe while hiking in the park. I conducted surveys on Yosemite trails, and I analyzed data from Yosemite Search and Rescue database. A new system of signage and trail markers have been designed using best design practices with recommendations for placement using best wayfinding practices as part of this project. The new system is meant to improve the hiking experience for users by increasing readability, eliminating sign pollution at trail junctions, and reducing the amount of search and rescue operations for injured or lost hikers. Now, the National Park Service does not currently have universally implemented design guidelines for a hiking trail signage and marker system, but that does not mean that there are no guidelines currently in place, but they are outdated and most do not follow best design practices for environmental graphic design. Now, the lack of such guidelines can lead to issues with hiking trail signage design consistency, primarily relating to content layout, materials, and trail sign placement. Now, consistency in the design of information, such as layout, will help a person know what to look for. And consistency in location of signage will help a person know where to look for the information. And one of the primary reasons for having a marker system is to reduce what's called sign pollution, which is when there are too many signs at, say, a trail junction. And this can cause an overload of information for the hiker. I collected and analyzed data from the Yosemite Search and Rescue Incident Database of 2019 incidents. The data revealed areas in the park where most incidents occur, the types of incidents, the time of day that most incidents occur, incident statistics, incident conditions, and the amount of time it took for subjects to be rescued. Now, all of this data supports the need for an improved hiking trail wayfinding system. This first visualization here on this slide shows where most incidents occur in the park. Now, I learned through an interview with the Search and Rescue Operations Manager that 25% of all park incidents happen on missed trail, and this visualization clearly shows that right here. It also shows that a lot of incidents occur on Yosemite Falls Trail, which is another popular trail in the park, and that's going to be over here. Now, it's important to note that both of these trails are rated as strenuous in terms of difficulty. The next visualization shows the incident types with day hikers, which is going to be this one right here, this outer ring, as the highest percentage group for incidents. And then the final visualization on this slide shows the time of day that most incidents occur. And you can see that they typically happen between the hours of 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. And I also learned during my interview that search and rescue do not typically perform rescues at night for lost hikers if there is no immediate need to rescue them. And so that's actually one of the reasons why we don't see as many rescues over here, which is when the sun has gone down. All right, on this next slide, we have a few more visuals. And this first one that we have here is just going to show some basic hiker statistics based on gender and age to give us an idea of who is being rescued. And then the next visualization shows that most subjects in need of search and rescue, which is again this outer ring here, is ill or injured, and that 1% of rescues in 2019 are for subjects who were never found. And then the last visualization shows the location and the amount of rescues depending on the season, and the majority of rescues occur during the summer and fall seasons, which could be due to the increase in visitors during that time. All right, so let's take a look at some signs. Now, it's pretty obvious to see that the sign that we have here on the left is it's difficult to read. This sign is being used at a trail junction where another trail connects to backcountry trails. It's made out of metal and it uses stenciled typography that is barely legible. Now, the sign on the right is just a few feet actually from the sign that you see there on the left, and it's even more difficult to read due to its location there in the weeds. Another sign not shown here is also present at this intersection, directing hikers traveling in the opposite direction. And this is actually a perfect example of sign pollution. This location in the park was pointed out to me by a park ranger as an area where hikers frequently get lost or are confused. So this area would actually benefit from having one sign instead of three in order to minimize confusion for hikers. And another thing that I'd like to point out, especially on this next slide, is that this is not the only type of sign that you're going to find on hiking trails in Yosemite directing hikers. So here we have another sign that is also used. This is actually, this one right here on the left is on Mirror Lake Trail. And this is a sign that's made out of wood. It has a sans serif typography that is embossed and filled in with a white paint. This sign includes arrows. However, those arrows should actually be left aligned on the sign if it were following standard wayfinding design principles. And then we also have another sign there, which is actually found on Mist Trail. And when comparing these signs to the signs we saw on the previous slide, you're going to see that there is inconsistency in design and materials, and that hikers are actually less likely to use the signs for wayfinding, which can, again, result in confusion and frustration for the user. So the big question is, how should signs be designed for a hiking environment? Well, signs in an unfamiliar environment are actually read in the same way that we read the rest of the setting, using a scanning and glancing process that is akin to a person looking for meaning in a non-objective work of art. So we actually read signs in a relatively unstructured way, almost as like a series of glances. And if users are glancing at signs instead of reading them, then the information needs to be structured so that it can be processed easier, which means destinations need to be put into smaller groups. If a trail sign contains like 3 or 4 destinations, then the information needs to be grouped with no more than 3 or 4 destinations per group. So if you see this sign here that we have on the right, you'll see that this sign contains multiple destinations to the top of Half Dome. It actually contains 12 different destinations. So that means that the information should actually be grouped into either 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 3. Another part of my research included conducting surveys on 3 different trails in the valley. I chose to do surveys on Mirror Lake, Mist Trail, and Upper Yosemite Fall. I had subjects complete a 20-question survey about the trail they had just completed so they could answer questions about trail signs and trail difficulty. I gathered 86 surveys over the course of 4 days. One of the questions I asked was about hiking in the dark at Yosemite or another national park. And I learned that almost half of the subjects I surveyed admitted to hiking in the dark. Now, according to a study done in 2010 by a graduate student named Jared Doak, one of the main contributing factors to hikers becoming lost on the trail was from losing the trail accidentally and then becoming overcome by darkness. And according to the National Forest Service, hiking trails are not actually required to contain retroreflective material. Now, why would hiking trail signs not need retroreflective material when half of the subjects I surveyed admitted to hiking in the dark, and when darkness is a contributing factor for losing the trail. So this brought up another question. What can we add to the system to make it visible at night? And this is where I decided to look into biomimicry. In 1997, Janine Benyus popularized the emerging discipline of biomimicry that has since taken the design world by storm. Biomimicry is an innovative approach to design challenges by imitating nature's processes, forms, or systems to create sustainable solutions. A biomimetic approach to design encourages the inclusion of disciplines outside the field of design to help with learning and understanding how the natural world has remained sustainable and how nature has solved challenges on its own. It's important to know that biomimicry is not about copying, but it is about learning. Biomimicry is used to learn the process and emulate the function of the organism using best design principles. If the system was going to work at night, I knew I needed to create a sustainable and cost-efficient solution. So I asked myself, how does nature solve for low light visibility? And the answer is bioluminescence. I traveled to Connecticut to observe and collect bioluminescent mushrooms in order to experience bioluminescence firsthand. This is the specimen I collected of Canelus stypticus, one of over 80 species of mushrooms that are luminescent, and oddly enough, only glow in North America, despite growing all over Europe. The natural phenomenon of bioluminescence is the emission of visible light by living organisms, mediated by an enzyme catalyst reaction of molecular oxygen with a substrate. The challenge of imitating the luminescent process is creating the luminescence without the presence of the organism or any part of the organism. This is a photo I took of the mushrooms right here on the right, giving off their greenish glow. And I have to say, it is pretty fascinating to see. But how will this work for a hiking system? Well, the extraction of the protein enzyme luciferase has successfully been done by Dr. Bruce Branchini and his team of researchers at Connecticut College. Dr. Branchini and his team extracted luciferase, and it was reported that the protein was stored and retained 90% activity for at least 6 weeks. Dr. Branchini's research could lead to a solution for imitating the process they are currently using to retain luminescence. If the chemical process can be imitated using environmentally safe and sustainable products, then this could lead to a biomimetic solution for nighttime navigation. Now, ideally, once the chemical process of luminescence is imitated, the glow will take the color of the marker instead of emitting a single color. The solution would need to be used in a paint for the marker system and then applied to natural features on hiking trails, such as trees, boulders, rocks, or wooden posts. This solution would work best for the national parks where electricity is scarce in remote areas and is expensive to supply on hiking trails. And the glow is bright enough to be seen for trail indication. However, it's also faint, so as to not be disruptive to the natural environment. As I was conducting this research for low light visibility, I wanted to ensure my designs could use a biomimetic solution. So let's look at what I've designed. The signage and marker system designed for this project was inspired by the Czech hiking marker standard, Appalachian Trail Markers, and the National Ski Areas Association Trail Difficulty Rating. The markers are 6-inch squares, each one communicating the direction of travel intended for a specific trail or changes to the trail that are important for the hiker to know for navigation. The entire system contains 24 markers, 8 markers for each level of difficulty. These markers indicate the direction of travel a hiker would need to go without the use of directional arrows. The markers would also take the place of directional arrows on the trail signs, which would reduce the amount of signs needed at a trail junction. Now, due to the current COVID-19 restrictions, user testing had to be done virtually with a limited group of experienced hikers. So I conducted virtual user surveys with a group of 6 users. They were tested on marker identification, trail difficulty color choices, and sign preferences. Now, all users were able to identify the following markers: continue straight, right turn, left turn, T-junction, and four-way junction. Now, 5 out of 6 users were able to identify the marker indicating a right connecting trail. 4 out of 6 users were able to identify the marker indicating a left connecting trail. And 2 out of the 6 users were able to identify the marker indicating switchbacks. All users were able to correctly identify the colors associated with trail difficulty, with green being identified as the easiest, blue identified as moderate, and black was associated with strenuous. Now, in-person user testing will be conducted at a later date when social distancing recommendations are no longer in place to collect more research about the viability of actually using the system, and also to make improvements to these preliminary designs. Further research is needed for creating all of the components of a complete wayfinding system to be used by the national parks. There needs to be more research dedicated to learning about nighttime readability. And the system would also need an improved hiking rating scale, measuring terrain difficulty and trail distance, as well as newly designed paper maps that coincide with the system. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is s_m421@txstate.edu.